Hey, architecture firm owners and emerging leaders. Get ready for unparalleled insight into the development of a world-class architecture firm and a worldwide organization driving the digital transformation of the design and construction industry. With Build Smart, the podcast that's changing how our profession operates. We share the incredible stories behind innovation in the building industry with my friend and co-host, Patrick McLeamy, FAIA, former CEO of the international architecture firm, HOK.
You know, Yamasaki's office or firm lasted during his lifetime. And when he passed away, I think that was the end of the Yamasaki office. Helmut did not want that. He wanted a firm that would live out and grow beyond the founders.
In Season 1, discover the untold stories behind HOK's meteoric rise, from 150 employees in St. Louis to a powerhouse with over 1,900 staff members and 27 offices worldwide.
You know, they weren't as polite as the Kojima people. That was just boom. And anytime you have a creditor, whether it's Kojima or the bank, that wants their money, unless you can raise money someplace else, you are out of business.
Bankrupt. And hold on tight for Season 2, where Patrick takes us on a new adventure as chairman of Building Smart International, shaping the future of digital transformation in the design, construction, and operation of built assets.
Ian Howell, Ken Harold, and I, Ken was my technical representative from HOK. The three of us took a tour of Europe of 5 cities in 5 days. Very busy time.
Simply follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Smart now and uncover lessons that will transform you and your architecture firm. Hey, architecture firm owners and emerging leaders. Get ready for unparalleled insight into the development of a world-class architecture firm and a worldwide organization driving the digital transformation of the design and construction industry. With Build Smart, the podcast that's changing how our profession operates. We share the incredible stories behind innovation in the building industry with my friend and co-host, Patrick McLeamy, FAIA, former CEO of the international architecture firm, HOK.
You know, Yamasaki's office or firm lasted during his lifetime. And when he passed away, I think that was the end of the Yamasaki office. Helmut did not want that. He wanted a firm that would live out and grow beyond the founders.
In Season 1, discover the untold stories behind HOK's meteoric rise, from 150 employees in St. Louis to a powerhouse with over 1,900 staff members and 27 offices worldwide.
You know, they weren't as polite as the Kojima people. That was just boom. And anytime you have a creditor, whether it's Kojima or the bank, that wants their money, unless you can raise money someplace else, you are out of business.
Bankrupt. And hold on tight for Season 2, where Patrick takes us on a new adventure as chairman of Building Smart International, shaping the future of digital transformation in the design, construction, and operation of built assets.
Ian Howell, Ken Harold, and I, Ken was my technical representative from HOK. The three of us took a tour of Europe of 5 cities in 5 days. Very busy time.
Simply follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Smart now and uncover lessons that will transform you and your architecture firm. This episode of Entree Architect Podcast is supported by our generous sponsors, BetterHelp and arcat.com. My name is Mark R. LePage, and you are listening to Entree Architect Podcast, where each week I speak with inspiring, passionate people who share their knowledge and expertise, all to help you build a better business as a small firm entrepreneur architect. Laurie Barkman, welcome to Entree Architect Podcast.
Thanks so much, Mark. I'm excited to be with you today.
I'm excited to have you with us. This is a topic that many architects struggle with. And so this will be a fun conversation. I think architects will be enlightened by what you have to say. But let me introduce you before we jump into any of that. In today's episode, we're going to explore the critical yet often overlooked aspect of business ownership, transition planning. Many entrepreneurs delay this planning, right? Architects delay it all the time, risking financial loss and personal dissatisfaction. Today's guest, Laurie Barkman, brings invaluable insight from her experience as the CEO of a $100 million company and as a mergers and acquisitions advisor. Laurie authored the book, The Business Transition Handbook, How to Avoid Succession Pitfalls and Create Valuable Exit Options, where she offers essential guidance for business owners planning their exit. And today, Laurie will share why it's imperative for entrepreneurs to begin the transition planning process sooner rather than later, as many of us do as architects. We think we're going to practice forever. We never really think about that. She'll offer some actionable advice to ensure your business is not only sell ready, but positioned to maximize both your financial and personal rewards. Join us today as we have this conversation. Laurie, it's great to have you with us at Entre Architect Podcast.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, this is such an important topic. I'm so glad that you've decided to spotlight it for your audience.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Before we jump into all the details of that, I'd love to understand who you are. Where did you start and when did you discover your passion for what you do today? And maybe even who or what inspired you to get started on this path?
I really got inspired by this in my experience as a CEO. I was hired in from the outside as part of a long-term succession plan in a privately held third-generation company. My boss was the chairman and the third generation, and at the time he was in his 60s. His grandfather was the founder. In transportation logistics, back in those early days, this company is about 120 years old. And he had a drayage business. It was fruit and vegetables in a cart pulled by a horse with a blind eye up a hill in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, from the river, up the hill. And that was the origin of that company. And then when the next generation took it over, they introduced trucking and warehousing. And then by the third generation, again, who was my boss, and by the time I joined the company, of course, it was very, very well established. And he had introduced in the 80s/early 90s, this aspect of logistics called reverse logistics, which is returns and how do you handle damages. And what inspired me about that story and in that company was when the next generation got the baton, they did something different. They took it to the next level. They innovated. So that always sort of stuck with me. And then also my experience running a subsidiary of this company, when we went through the transaction, there was a team of us from an executive standpoint. It wasn't just myself. And of course, the acquiring company had a massive playbook. They were a global transportation logistics company acquiring us. It was a significant size deal. It was over $1 billion with a B. So it was a lot of work for us and for them. And we all wanted to make it work and be successful. My job, as well as the other executives, was to keep our foot on the gas, make sure the business was running effectively, and then if the deal was going to be done, get it done well, and then transition. How do we transition and do the integration? And after I left the new business, after a year and a half, I left and moved on. I was in private equity for a bit. And so I realized I kind of like this deal thing. I kind of like a little bit of a deal junkie. I kind of like putting things together. Most of my career has been in marketing and growth type of roles, but coming off of a P&L role, going through this M&A experience, I realized, there's something really interesting happening. And I was learning about exit planning and this dynamic in the United States of our baby boomer entrepreneurs who are retiring, and many of them do not have a succession plan. So this age wave, this silver tsunami is a real thing. And that's how I started to put it together. I was interested in working with entrepreneurs to help them create value so that when they're ready, they can exit on their terms. I got my certification as a mergers and acquisitions advisor. I'm certified on the Value Builder System platform, which is a system to help us, recognize what value metrics we have today and what we can do. And an MBA. So I put together all these things in kind of a somewhat unique way, I think, from coming at it from the strategy, let's not just talk, let's make a plan and let's be objective about it. Let's quantify and let's document our plan. If a plan is just in our head, is it really a plan? I don't think so. And if we don't write it down, we're less likely to achieve it. And I found that as an executive, I had all these skills and traits and competencies, and my desire to work with entrepreneurs who are founder-led or bootstrap businesses, or they've worked in a multi-generational company. Let's not let it just shudder, and let's get rewarded for our hard work. And I think there's a really special message in the US economy for that. What happens if all these businesses close and then there's no one to take them over? And so, my bigger mission is to help educate entrepreneurs on why this is important. What is the process for increasing value and building as we go? And then how do we let go with success and on our own terms?
Yeah. You mentioned that many of us don't think about it until it's too late. Architects are very much like that. Many architects expect to practice for their entire life, right? And when they're done, they just close the door. And so many architects really don't plan for an exit, right? It's not really part of their vocabulary. And so I think this is an important topic for architects because they should, right? Even if they do plan to live and practice forever, they should still have an exit plan, especially if they're going to dedicate their entire life to something. Wouldn't it be nice if it could live on beyond you, right? If it could become part of your legacy and continue impacting the world. And so I'm hoping that we inspire some architects today who may not be thinking about it. So they will start thinking about it. So before we jump into that, can we talk a little bit of some definitions, sort of get really basic and talk about the difference between exit planning and contingency planning and succession planning? What do all these terms mean and how are they different?
Yeah, absolutely. I think succession planning is a good umbrella term. A good umbrella term that I like to use on top of that is transition planning. The word transition, I think, is a really important word because it recognizes a journey. It recognizes that there's a movement from here to there. Whereas the word exit, it seems so finite, right? We are now exit, we're out. So at a top level, that's why I call myself the Business Transition Sherpa, because I recognize that this is a journey and I want to work with you, for business owners. I want to help you through that journey from transition to transaction, from creating value to letting go. So if we recognize that transition means a couple of different things, then underneath that is where I think these other words live. One of which is, you mentioned, contingency planning. Contingency planning in the context of when I work with clients is largely around risk mitigation. And first off, it's around the asset itself. So let's recognize as a business owner, are you building an asset or are you just creating a job?
Right.
If you've created a job, then you probably aren't really taking vacation. You're probably very tied in. You're the only one who knows how to do certain things in the business. You're the rainmaker, and the list goes on and on and on. And you may have an owner-dependent business because it's you. And for the architects that I've spoken with, many of them who have smaller firms are in that situation. For the architects that I've spoken with that have established management teams and have well-established brand and reputation in a certain, whether it's geography or certain competency area, there's something that's inherently added on to what they do. Well, what happens if, right? What happens if you as the owner, and maybe you're 100% owner, maybe you have partners, but what happens if you're not able to serve? Now, what does that mean? Well, there can literally take you out of your capacity if you die. You may be incapacitated if someone in your family needs you to care for them, that you're no longer able to serve. So what does that mean? For some firms that have partners, and I understand, many architects may have a partner arrangement where there's a buy-sell agreement in place. But you would be surprised, Mark, how many organizations do not have that type of agreement already in place, nor do they have a funding mechanism for it. So that's an important thing, especially if our time horizon for transition is out in front of us, maybe 5 years, 10 years, because it's life, right? Something can happen to us.
Right.
And what happens to the business if you are no longer able to run it? And this becomes more and more serious when you are the only one there. If there's partners, then of course that risk is mitigated. So we look at contingency planning from that standpoint. What do we need to do to protect the business? And it'll also protect your family, because guess what? They're going to be in mourning. And if you're a sole proprietor or a sole owner, most likely your spouse is going to inherit this business. They may never intend to work in it. What does that mean for your employees? They're probably going to leave. What does that mean for your clients? They're probably going to leave. And then what happens to the business itself? It's either going to shutter, liquidate, or sharks will be swirling and they'll snap it up for pennies on the dollar. So that's contingency planning at a high level. And
Yep.
there's other pieces of it too, but that they just to conceptualize it. And then the other thing you asked about was succession planning. And there's two flavors of succession. One is the succession of ownership, and one is the succession of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly for me and my podcast and my book, I focus on the succession of ownership. And exit planning, or having an exit, is something akin to the succession of ownership, right? People talk about it in that sense, where you've exited your business, or, said differently, you've sold your business. You can exit and not sell, we could talk about that, but conceptually, that's kind of what that means. And so that's how I like to talk about it and split it out.
Okay, that sounds great. We're talking to lots of architects at all different levels, right? Different places in their businesses. Some of them are just thinking about starting a firm or have just started a firm. So they're startups. And then there's some that have been around for a few years and they're starting to gain some traction and they've starting to grow. And then there's some at the very end that are older and more seasoned and are thinking about, maybe I do want to sort of take a break and transition this firm, right? But I'm a little late, right? I haven't planned anything. So can we look at those three buckets and think about, or talk to each one of those audience members and talk about what we should be doing right now, today, at each one of those steps?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're just getting started, I think it's important to get your firm established and do so with the guidance of professionals, whether they are tax advisory, legal advisory, and set yourself up for success to protect the business as you build it. I think that's one thing that I've seen. The other would be, if there is a positioning that you have in your industry, whether it's a specialty where you can niche down, think about that conceptually. It's always easier to start out in a niche and maybe grow and add another niche than it is to start general and then niche down, because you feel like you're walking away from business. I think for companies, not just architect firms, but in general, when you're in growth mode, you say yes to a lot of things that maybe you shouldn't say yes to. So be mindful of what inherently may add value to your business as you set the course for your success. And again, whether it's geography or whether it's a certain architectural niche, being known for something, how do you create that sense of, hey, maybe if we exit one day, they're going to want us because of X and Y. So for folks that are in that middle period where they're not the startup, they're still growing, or they're looking to enhance the value of the business, of course, we want to protect it. So those are the contingency things that we talked about. We want to protect the value. We want to mitigate risks. And at the same time, we want to understand, well, what factors will drive more value in the business, and be able to look forward to look backwards. So for those companies or firms that are in that middle zone, what I like to do with clients is get them to think about an exit timeline. And it's so powerful, because if we can think about, well, who might own my business one day? And think about, wow, well, what pain points am I solving for them? The more time you have, the more runway you have to make any changes, then that's great. And if you've established this niche and you kind of double down on it, your brand is well known for it. By the time you're interested in selling, maybe already you've cultivated those relationships so that, you've included that in your thinking around your exit picture. For folks that are closer into an exit, I just want to say, look, there's a difference between sell ready and ready to sell. And it's no different than an architecture firm versus a neurology office, a physician. With this specialty, your professional license, you've got a craft and you've cultivated your skill and honed your skill for many years. And when a buyer is considering buying your firm, be mindful of that and put yourself in their shoes. What are they buying? What are they actually buying? Are they buying a reputation? They're buying a brand. They're buying an identity. They're buying your client list. They're buying contracts. What is transferable? What is attractive? And what is of value to the buyer? A firm that has a solo practitioner, again, whether it's an architect or another professional services provider, if you're the only one in your firm or the leader doing what you're doing and delivering service, providing value, if you intend to retire, what is it that the buyer's getting?
Right.
So all these concepts start to weave in, the architecture firms that I'm familiar with that have sold, pretty sizable firms because they were eventually integrated in, I think probably most likely asset sales, where they were integrated into the business. So the old name eventually went away, but nonetheless, the employees had an opportunity to grow with the acquiring firm. And that was probably a win, hopefully, for the employees. I'm sure the owners had a transition period, but then they transitioned out. And again, the examples that I'm familiar with, they were new to the market. So it was a market play where they could continue to grow. Why I'm suggesting this thought process is it's kind of like, Stephen Covey with how do you begin with the end in mind? How do you think ahead to look backwards so we can reverse engineer your exit? And again, I'll say it so many times, and you've said it here tonight too, that the more time we're giving ourselves to think about these ideas and concepts and understanding what value we can create in our business is going to increase the likelihood of an exit you feel good about.
Yeah, you read my mind. The podcast listeners can't see me smiling, but when you said Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind, I was going to reference that. The 7 habits of highly effective people. One of them is to start with the end in mind. And that's really the message here. But if you are at the end of your career and you're thinking, oh, I'm late, it's not too late. There is ways that you can make sure that you have some value. But it is much easier if you start from the beginning that way or somewhere in the middle and recognize that you need to create an asset that somebody wants. And often it is a specialty, right? That you have niched down and you have built a reputation around a specialty or, a specific location, like you said, Laurie, that these larger firms come in and they just want a presence in a specific region and they'll acquire you for that. And so those are important things to think about. Let's take a quick break to say thank you to our sponsors for their support of this episode. Architects, listen up. Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world and is going through a hard time, therapy can give you the tools to approach your life in a very different way. I know this community of small firm architects very well, and I see many of you struggling. That's why I reached out to this episode's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote. And by filling out just a few questions, BetterHelp can match you with a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in the show notes. It's betterhelp.com/architect. Just use that link, betterhelp.com/architect. Clicking that link helps support this podcast, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. So you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. If you need someone to talk to, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the show notes or visit betterhelp.com/architect. That's betterhelp.com/architect. Thank you to BetterHelp for supporting this podcast and for supporting our community of small firm architects. For over 30 years, ARCAT has been providing AEC professionals with high quality and up-to-date building product information. Today, ARCAT.com is much more than a product catalog, with BIM, CAD, and specifications created in collaboration with manufacturers. Beyond that, ARCAT.com also offers lead data, continuing education resources, newsletters featuring the latest projects and products, and don't forget, detailed podcasts. ARCAT.com is truly the one-stop shop for everything architecture. Try it out. Go to arcat.com. That's ARCAT.com. Can we get more specific about value? What does make one firm more valuable than the other?
I'll cover a few things, and of course, the devil's in the details. But
Right.
in general, the way we look at value drivers, first off, is financial and the financial performance of the firm. Most typically, we look at the last 3 years and what's the trending been. With COVID, many buyers want to understand what was the trend even before COVID, and then has the firm recovered since? Yes, no, if not, why? And the quality of your reporting and consistency is also part of that. So it's the numbers, it's the profitability, it's your revenue, but your revenue growth and trending. And it's really about the bottom line. Unless you're a recurring revenue business, your multiple's most likely not going to be based on revenue. It's going to be based on profit. There are many firms that look to minimize taxes, and it looks like we are a break-even business.
Right.
Imagine
Yep.
if you're the buyer.
Right.
So put yourself in those shoes. That's probably a good thing. Is, do we have consistent reporting? I'm not saying you got to have audited financials, but if you are using QuickBooks, I think that's fine. Whatever system you're using, use it consistently and use it effectively. If you're able to get reviewed financials, it's not a big financial burden to get something like that. And it's a step down from auditing, right? But it's a step up in another way. So eventually, if you have reviewed financials, I think that's a good intermediate. And eventually you may want to have a quality of earnings analysis done if you're looking to sell your business. I think that for some companies, that's definitely worth the investment. Other things that impact in this category include the industry that you're in. So in this case, we're talking about architects. I work with engineering companies, architects. This category in terms of the industry definitely has an average company. You might see a certain multiple of EBITDA or seller discretionary earnings. And what we do is we look to get a baseline based on some call them recent sales within the last 5 years or 7 years within that industry category. So that gives us an understanding. But then the comparative of up or down really depends on some of the nuances of the specific business. That's where the art and the science comes in on valuations. Ultimately, the buyers are the ones who are going to decide what a privately held company is worth. We can't just go on Yahoo Finance and look it up.
Right.
So the other things that we look at include the growth potential. What's the growth potential of this business, or is it all tapped out? Think of the Y2K businesses. When it got closer and closer to the year 2000, the valuations of those software companies went in the toilet. And, so demonstrating that there's field left to plow for the buyers is probably worth it. And it can't just be vapor, where we think this is a really good thing. And we're going to talk about this, but we haven't started it ourselves and we don't have any data to back it up. So growth potential is important. And then I also mentioned it, recurring revenue. The handshake deal, the long-standing relationship, the non-papered arrangement, that's reoccurring. So you have a client, they keep coming back to you and you have a long-standing relationship, but it's not a commitment. That's reoccurring as opposed to recurring. So an O versus no in there. And a lot of companies feel really good about the reoccurring relationships until they go away. And then
Right.
You're like, oh, wait a minute.
And if you go away, it's likely that they'll go away.
That's what the buyers worry about. So you got to really put yourself in the buyer's shoes and think about risk. And this is one of the things we were talking about earlier with risks, which leads into the next part of risk, which is, well, what customer risk do we have? How do we have customer concentration? And are we contracted or are we not? And how likely are these customers to transfer when there's a new owner? We may also have employee risk, especially in the smaller firms. And you, as the top employee, if you're the rainmaker and you're the top architect in the firm, then imagine something happens to you. Again, tying back to the idea of contingency planning. And then the third thing would be your suppliers in the architecture field. Or if maybe there are certain relationships you have that from a supply side, what happens if those go away? During COVID, we saw a lot of challenges with supply chain. So just to give that as a high level example. So that's what we call the Switzerland structure. And those 3 areas of risk we need to be mindful of and how can we mitigate. There are certainly other types of risk too, but this is just high level for the analysis. The other types of value drivers include what we call hub and spoke. So this is centered on the owner dependency challenges in the firm. And if we have an owner dependent business, we will give ourselves a lower score on this one. And it definitely will detract from that potential premium we're seeking, as well as customer satisfaction. And customer sat is interesting because if we have quantifiable metrics, something like a net promoter score, or if we can quantify, for consumer firms, they might have Google reviews and things of that nature. But a services firm, something like a net promoter score can be used. We were using it in the company I was with, and every quarter, we would reach out to, these were large companies that we would sit down with executives and understand how are we doing. And then we would track that data over time. Net Promoter Score is a tool that's used across many industries. And so there tends to be industry benchmarks, which is kind of nice. If you're an overperformer and it's one of the things you can demonstrate to a buyer as to the value, this is why we're a well-run firm. And the other thing too, when it comes to customer satisfaction, if we have very satisfied customers, it can lead to a high referral rate, which leads to a lower cost of acquisition, and then hopefully a higher retention. So all these things start to integrate in.
So it goes back to building a really successful business that's strong, that has good recurring revenue, which for architects, that's difficult from the service side, but we talk about products often. And so if you have products that bring in recurring revenue, that could add value, and that becomes a huge asset for an architect to have a product like that. Let's shift from the seller side to the buyer side, Laurie. Let's say we did all this, right? We got this all working and our firms are running well. We have all these metrics. There's assets built into the business. It's not all reliant on us. And if it is, we have a contingency plan that makes sense. How do we determine who should buy our firm and how do we find them? I mean, if we get this all right, how do we know where to go? There's no market where you can go and say, hey, I'm an architecture firm. Come buy my architecture firm. How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the magic of this industry. And, as a mergers and acquisitions advisor, this is the role that myself and the other professionals play. Just like when you're selling your house, can you sell it on your own? Sure. But it's very, very difficult, especially if you're trying to run your business. And if you've not done it before, what I hear most often from people who have gone through the process is they wish they didn't. They regret maybe they left money on the table, or maybe there were things that didn't quite go the way they wanted. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the process, there's a process for bringing your company to market, and things that we would do to get started would be just making sure the financials are in order and that we are looking at them to understand if we should do any add backs that need to be addressed and get an adjusted EBITDA picture. We would also then begin the marketing process, which is developing a memorandum that will be confidential until an NDA is signed, and then sharing that with potential buyers. The buyer research, the buyer outreach, all those steps, and there's a lot of work to be done. And then there's kissing the frogs process, right? Which, do they have the financing? Is this the right fit? All those things. In terms of finding the right fit, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the magic of it. I wish there was one single place to go and I could just click a few things or go to ChatGPT and just bam.
Right.
But that's why, I enjoy doing what I do. We try to make that match. And yeah, it can take some time. People say, well, how long does this process take to sell a company? It can take a bit, right? So especially if we start to go down a path with a buyer and for whatever reason it doesn't work out, and now we got to go down the path with another buyer. That's why I dedicated a whole chapter to it in my book, who should own your business after you. I think it's worth thinking about. We talked about this earlier in the show, where if you are considering your exit, building with the exit in mind, as you're building your business, thinking about who might want to own it one day, and more of a chance that these things will start to line up when you're ready and being prepared all the way. I like to say too that we can't do exit planning when we're exiting. It's too late.
Right.
And all the things that you and I are talking about, Mark, the big secret that everybody should know is that all these things are going to make your business more valuable and more enjoyable to run. Why would you wait? Why would you wait to do these things until you're quote unquote ready to sell? There's a difference between sell ready and ready to sell. You might say you're ready to sell, but your business is not sell ready.
Yeah, I was just going to say that yes, it helps you at the end. But imagine if you had a firm that you had a plan, right? Either right from the beginning or somewhere in the middle where you're running a business and it's working well. And now you have a plan that this is how we're going to exit 10, 20 years from now, right? This is how this is going to work. and to have that confidence and security to know that you have all your eggs in the basket, right? Now, I'm not even sure that's the right analogy, but to get all your ducks in a row. There you go. It would give an architect a good feeling, right? To know that it's all in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I had a conversation with one firm. They wanted to explore either exit planning and the getting ready, or they wanted to talk about a sale. And they had multiple partners, some of whom had already retired. One was going to retire. And then the younger partners were thinking, well, do we want to buy them out? And what does this all look like? Another firm I had talked to had already gone through the process. And the partner that was running it, she was running it by herself. She had bought out a partner that was retiring. And so what they had done was, if you rewind 10, 15 years, those original partners had been mindful of their own transition, bringing people in and then doing an internal transfer. So if we ask them, hey, who should own your business after you? Their answer would be, well, the other partners will.
Yeah.
And some firms who are not investing in the bench, right, the bench strength and bringing people in and then eventually offering them equity and eventually, them taking over larger piece, they're the ones that are going to struggle. Because if you talk to someone like me, when you say, hey, I'm ready to sell, and there's no bench, you're all going to retire. What is the asset that's being transferred? If it's know-how and relationships and your intention is to retire, what is the buyer going to get?
Yeah. You're essentially selling a closed firm.
Right. And will your employees want to stay on? And is that enough when it's an asset sale, again, be considerate of what are the assets they're transferring?
Right. So as we wrap up, Laurie, I want to ask you the final question I ask all my guests. What would you say is the one thing that a small firm architect can do today to build a better business for tomorrow?
I think having a transition mindset would be the number one thing. Be mindful that transition is an all-encompassing, holistic thing. It's personal, it's financial, and it's business. Too many times we wait too long and we are only thinking about the transaction. We're not thinking enough about the personal side, the emotional side of this transition.
Yeah.
And it can lead to some staggering statistics about exit regrets and also, depression and other things that can come with that. So my mission is to help people from a holistic perspective to have an exit without regret.
Her name is Laurie Barkman. You can learn more about her at the website, thebusinesstransitionSherpa.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. Laurie, before we started recording, you had mentioned that in addition to the book that you have, which we'll also link in the show notes, you also have a course. Want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's called Endgame Entrepreneurship. And it's very much along the theme of what we've talked about today, building with the exit in mind. And I think it's a wonderful tool and resource for people to learn about these concepts, especially as a companion to the book, and it takes it to the next level. And we're going to be inviting people to masterminds so that they can not only have that resource for video learning when they're hopefully making the time, but also then to have peers and myself to help them along the way on their journey.
All right. So you can learn more about that at thebusinesstransitionSherpa.com. The book is called The Business Transition Handbook, How to Avoid Succession Pitfalls and Create Valuable Exit Options. Laurie, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for helping businesses and entrepreneurs all around the world, especially architects, find their value, right? To be able to make those transitions must be very gratifying to be in a position like that where you do help people find a way to create legacy as they move on to their next phase. So I appreciate you for doing that and for coming by here and sharing a little bit of knowledge with our community at the EntreArchitect Podcast.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was really fun to be with you today. And I want everyone to have a really positive succession story.
Well, we're looking forward to helping you do that. If you liked this episode of EntreArchitect Podcast, please share a link to this episode with a friend. Either just click the share button or highlight the URL and send the link to this episode with a friend, because that's how EntreArchitect has grown to serve thousands more architects just like you throughout the 10 plus years of EntreArchitect. That's how we've grown, architect to architect. So I would love for you to share this episode and all the episodes with one friend every week. Would love that. And thank you to our sponsors for this episode. We don't have an episode if there's no sponsors, so thank you to our sponsors. Links to those sponsors, which you should go visit and click, and all the resources that we discussed today for this specific episode, they are all available at entrearchitect.com/podcast. Every episode that we've recorded is there, entrearchitect.com/podcast. Go click the links to the sponsors and say hello. Entre Architect is a member of the Gable Media Podcast Network. You should go visit that at gablemedia.com. That is the next evolution of interactive media and resources for the AEC community. You can now earn continuing education credits for listening to select episodes of this podcast, Entre Architect Podcast. Yes, AIA CEUs for listening to a podcast. It's there, and many other podcasts are there as well, and you can listen to all of them and get credit. Learn more about our program, Gable Members Program, at the gablemedia.com/members website. That's GABL media.com/members. And if you are a small firm architect, join us today at Entre Architect Network. That is the worldwide organization for small firm entrepreneur architects. If you own your own architecture firm, you are an entrepreneur architect. You are an Entre Architect. With weekly live group business coaching, we have business coaching there, monthly live business training with AIA CEUs, 2 a month, so 24 AIA credits per year, including 12 of those are HSWs. We have them in the membership. Business resources, all the resources you need to run your business, special session webinars, mastermind groups, and a thriving community of small firm architects just like you. Hundreds of architects are there waiting for you to join. So we provide the support and encouragement you need to succeed as a small firm architect. I know that you haven't been trained as a business person when you launched your firm. That's what we do. Come learn how to run a business at Entre Architect Network. And today you can go join right now for free for 30 days at this link, entrearchitect.com/30 days will give you free 30 days for membership. Go check it out at entrearchitect.com/30 days, and I will see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of Entre Architect Podcast. My name is Mark R. LePage, and I want you to remember 3 words: love, learn, share. Have a great day.
Imagine earning continuing education credits while doing exactly what you're doing right now. Well, you can. Gable Media has revolutionized the way you earn your continuing education credits with a groundbreaking approach. Forget running around town and scouring the internet for credit-worthy courses. Fulfill your CE requirements effortlessly by listening to engaging podcasts just like the one you're listening to now. Our podcasts are designed to educate, entertain, and inspire, all in a user-friendly environment. But wait, there's more. Architects, Gable Media is also approved as an AIA continuing education services provider. Upon completion, we handle everything, from reporting your hours directly to the AIA to storing your certificates in your personal Gable Media profile for your self-reporting needs. So follow the link in the show notes and start earning your credits in the most innovative and entertaining way possible with Gable Media.
Attention architects and creative minds, get ready to supercharge your brand with Build Your Brand, the podcast that's unlocking the secrets of branding success for creatives. Hey there, it's Mark R. LePage, founder of Entre Architect, and I'm inviting you to join my friend, architect marketing expert Jeff Eccles at Build Your Brand podcast, where he explores the captivating stories of the world's top brands and transforms their lessons into powerful moves for small firm architects and creatives like you. In Season 1, Jeff shares the thrilling tale of Southwest Airlines, where he dissects their journey to the summit and distills it into strategies tailor-made for you.
It's important to keep in mind that companies like Southwest compete in the real world, just like you, and face real-world challenges, just like you. You might be surprised at how similar those challenges are to the struggles that you grapple with on a day-to-day basis.
Don't miss out on your blueprint for success. Subscribe, tune in, and let's build your brand together.
You may have noticed that the very best brands in the world are also known for having somewhat unique corporate cultures. That's often the glue that holds everything together when they encounter those rough spots.
We don't do it because it inconveniences the passengers to whom we are primarily dedicated, the short haul, frequent flyer.
Follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Your Brand today. Remember, no matter the size, the journey's the same. Your brand's journey to the top starts here.